Welcome back to the Jochum Strength Podcast. Today, Austin sits down with legendary coach and author of The Supple Leopard, Dr. Kelly Starrett, to discuss reconnecting mobility with performance. They dig into restoring positions, producing watts, and turning warmups into fight-ready prep games, throws, barefoot jumps, so that athletes can take smart risks and actually play better. If you care about culture, retest thinking, and results without the fluff, this one's for you. Enjoy the episode.
Before we hit the intro music, I wanted to introduce to you guys the Jochum Strength Insider. The Jochum Strength Insider is our online training platform that takes all of the ideas that we talk about on this podcast and implements them into a program that is available to you at the touch of your fingers. Our goal with the Jochum Strength Insider is to create better movers, to level up your life, and to move forward from where you are. We do this in a holistic fashion. Not only will you receive a program that has helped hundreds of people become better movers, you'll also receive access to our app that allows you to track everything, has video links for all exercises, and allows you to be in constant communication with a Jochum Strength coach. Along with this, you'll get our 30-page PDF nutrition and lifestyle guidelines. That includes everything from what to eat, how much of it to eat, why we're eating it, meditation habits, and other lifestyle habits that we implement with our clients to really level up their lives. If you're interested in trying out one of these programs, use podcast 25 in the discount section right before you pay for 25% off your first program. Boom.
This is the Jochum Strength Podcast. Take the leap down the rabbit hole with us as we interview elite level guests to unravel what high performance really is.
All right, well, Coach, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
It's so good to be here. And just so everyone can be very clear, I stalked you. That's how we're here. I literally am like, this kid, this coach is on fire. If everyone ended up in your training environment, we would cure athletic cancer. I'm just such a fan of what you're doing.
Well, that's pretty cool because I pulled up my first ever strength conditioning book I ever bought. This is the very first one I ever bought. I came from a very traditional, meathead ass background. And my coaches told me left and right, you're stiff, you're tight, you need to do something. And somebody, I can't remember, I think it was one of he was a graduate player that was kind of getting into the yogi world. And but he was trying to make an NFL roster. He's a freak athlete getting into the yogi world, but he's like, dude, I got this Supple Leopard book. You really need to check it out. I think it's going to change your life. I got this book, dude. I cannot tell you how fast I read this book and started running all of the couch stretches and everything. It was all so new to me. And that's something that I really want to talk to you about because I don't think people understand how new a lot of the things you were talking about in this book were. Now it is it's so commonplace that it's everybody's just yeah, that's just what you do. You just you kind of do some mobility, kind of foam roll, you kind of stretch, you do some soft tissue work. I'm that dude, maybe what year is it? 2025, maybe 11 years ago.
It doesn't even exist.
Doesn't exist. It was literally mind-blowing to me, all of this stuff. And I brought it to my football coach right away. We started implementing some of the stuff, but that's how new all of these ideas were. And I just love to hear kind of your thought process of when you put this stuff out, because again, and you just seeing the change, because now it's so commonplace that people, I really don't think people understand how not commonplace that was, and how I don't want to say radical it was, but I'm sure you felt so much pushback from being the initial step of you don't just have to be a locked up meathead your entire life.
Well, here's the deal is that I opened a gym in 2005. I started physio school 2004. And so my first year of physio school gets through, and just to make grad school easier, I had a baby. And then I was I should open a gym and then coach before and after grad school, because this is where I'm obsessed with. And it's really important. I think the framework is, I saw in real time that strength and conditioning was the best diagnostic tool on the planet. Whether we were talking about, athletes being prepared, fueling, motivation, culture, to what do you mean your hip doesn't go behind your body? What's going on? And one of the things that we really tried to I started to recognize was the physio was too far away from the strength conditioning. And so what was happening is that people were basically training, managing, being not having honest conversations about pain. And all the coaches were doing is they're like, yeah, pain is a medical problem, so we don't address pain here, but show up and we're going to squat, and if we'll just keep squatting and hopefully it'll get better. And meanwhile, the physio was waiting until people were basically dumpster fires down a blind alley and then trying to come in with a little fire extinguisher and say, hey, we've got the solution to this. And I'm like, the solution for this was movement quality, access to position, right? And who owns that? And what we found was, what was so subversive about that book is I tried to take everything that I was learning from the masters, and I had real masters in my life at that time in physio, and I said, hey, let's move this outside. It is not skilled to open up your hip or put an isometric with a band. Like, that's not skilled. This belongs in the gym. I meet Dick Herzl, right? I start getting bands. I'm like, oh my God, I can replicate all of these complicated physio things in the gym. And remember, I owned a gym. So what was happening is ultimately I came down to two ideas. Number one is that all we're really doing in Supple Leopard is saying, here's a bunch of what I'll call position transfer exercises. Instead of like skill transfer exercises, like heaving snatch balance, it's a position transfer exercise. It's going to give isometrics. We're going to be able to focus on a tissue, open up the brain, restore what's supposed to happen. And all of those things were normative. Like, these are normative ranges. This is what everyone says your shoulder should do and what your hip should do. Why can't you do that? So people are showing up to the gym without even the requisite range of motion, ability to achieve the shapes that we're suddenly training in a very modern strength conditioning way. We are snatching. We are overhead squatting. We are jumping. We are sprinting. It starts to, modern strength and conditioning starts to look like modern track and field. And then, what I realized is that I had this perfect template for exercise, modern strength and conditioning, and I had a perfect diagnostic tool, modern strength and conditioning, and I didn't even need corrective exercises. I just needed regression and progression, plus some of these skill transfer exercises that I could drop in. And again, the only two things I could really wrap my head around were, like, do you have range of motion? Yes or no? Like, how do we improve that or restore or give you more options? And then number two, did you generate more watts? Could you go faster and harder? And when we started giving people back their positions, magically, a lot of their pain stuff got out of the way. And that could have been because their brain was like, all new position, or we improved their efficiency, or we unloaded some tissue that was doing double duty. Who knows what the mechanisms are? But what the mechanisms are you now have better normative range and you went faster and you won a gold medal. And we started testing this. And I think the real magic was that athletes and coaches could figure out when to do it. It wasn't yet another thing we had to do.
Yeah, dude, that's so awesome. And then just like having the philosophy of the balance. Like, this is something that I talk about. It's like the balance of, like, you don't want to go full movement yogi and you don't want to go full meathead. And like, but that you don't negate these two things. You find the extremes and then you combine them into like this perfect middle ground. And like, I went full, this was my journey. I went full meathead into full movement yogi, where everything, because I was like kind of sold this thing of like, it's all about feeling better at some point. Like, where it was before, it was like not about feeling better. It was like, just don't be soft, don't be a pussy, keep squatting. And I was like, dude, I had a herniated disc at 16 years old. Like, I was just a wreck and they were telling me like I wasn't going to be able to deadlift after 16. It's like, okay, my entire life I'm going to go without picking things up. So like, there was that extreme. And then I got way too far into, like, I basically stopped doing performance and stopped like pushing my boundaries because I was so scared of like the lies that were told to me of like, you're just going to get hurt. You're just going to feel like crap. You just got to survive. And trying to find that balance is something that I think is like the actual magic in all of this. And I think we see the swing in strength conditioning to where, again, before the Supple Leopard and before a lot of the things that you were talking about, there was no mobility training. There was no like you were talking about, the physio world was all just like corrective exercise, like small little things that weren't making a big difference. Like, they were so disconnected. And then we got to like a little point of connection, I feel like. And then we went full into now it's like, now we have kids, like, dude, the most frustrating thing is like these 15-year-olds. What was that?
Full kook.
Full kook. It's like we have 15-year-olds now that are like, oh my God, it's like They have no ounce of muscle on their body. I mean, I don't know how they're in pain because they've never trained for anything in their life. And it's like their workout is a 20-minute foam rolling session. Like that's legitimate. I go to Lifetime and I look at this. I'm like, I got an entire workout done in the time that you were doing your corrective exercises at 15 years old. It's like, what happened? Like what is happening in the field there? Like, have you seen that progression as like the field has gone through, like from the start to finish to where it is now?
Oh yeah. What's interesting is if we even just take the word mobility, the only reference to the word mobility in the world is Eric Cressy, and he made a DVD called Magnificent Mobility. That is, if you go back, that's the only reference to mobility prior to Supple Leopard. Like that's it. And I specifically chose mobility because I was like, well, I mobilize joints and I mobilize tissues, so let's mobilize the body to be able to go load it. And so from the number one is that I was like, hey, stretching works, of course, but it's non-specific, doesn't have clear end goals, and we're not even sure like what tissues are we really loading. Because I mean, like, I'm like, yeah, cool, your stretching works for your 105-pound endurance runner. Have you ever worked with a ham hock of a 280-pound center? Like, it's not, you don't need the same sets of tools. You need a big set of power tools for this. So stretching wasn't good enough. Flexibility, I really felt like described the properties of a rubber hose. And I was like, hey, I don't actually want to, even just the technicality of this, like, I don't want to stretch you. I don't want you to be all flaccid. I want you to have access to your positions and to feel better. And so when we started doing that, and still even today, people, don't understand it. Look, because they're getting a screenshot and you're trying to understand a lot of context from a 30-second video that maybe you didn't even watch the full thing of. And unless you follow someone, you can't really understand their thinking because you just kind of drop it into the algorithm. Every once in a while, you get a snapshot. So, I have never said, let's foam roll before we work out. In fact, I'm like, have you ever gotten a massage and then stood up off the table and been like, let's fucking fight? Like, it doesn't happen, right? And I was like, well, that's what foam rolling is. And before your workout, I was like, there's so many things that would be better for us to do besides laying on the ground and going back and forth on, a whole body activation thing. I was like, let's play with tennis balls. Let's fight. Let's do breath hold. You recently had like, you guys are wrestling, holding on to balls. Like like, it's so fun and so many ways to prep the body for getting ready for a fight. And so now I've come to this idea that I want to see our preparation look like we're getting ready for a fight. And if my athlete is not drenched in sweat and we haven't woken up their nervous system and pulled them out of their alcoholic stupor, right? When I work with college kids, right? Then I'm like, hey, probably that's going to be appropriate for low load, low speed. And that's fine. Like, you can see how the fitnessing industry, right, where fitnessing is an amuse, fitnessing is a hobby, and that's okay. It's totally okay, but do not pretend that that is the same thing as performance. So when we start to put that performance lens on there, again, we started to see that people were not doing things in service of performance. They were doing things in service of, I have 2 hours. And let me give you an example. Physical culture has come about in the last 20 years, and there are so many great examples of physical culture, people's identities. They love to move and play, and it looks like dance, and it looks like martial arts. And I think the person who coined that term is Ido Portal, who's a fucking genius. But I don't have 3 hours in the gym, and I can't do Ido Portal and go to the Olympics. And that doesn't negate any of his brilliant thinking. It doesn't negate any of his drills. In fact, if you don't follow him and watch what he's doing, watch how he's thinking, and then modify how you're playing and integrating, I think you're really losing the opportunity to say, how can someone is an expert in this physical culture, which is about movement and play and knowing yourself and interacting with other people. But that is not the same thing as winning an NFL game or going to the goal or preparing, my college kids I work with 800 college kids at the University of California, Berkeley, as like sort of a high performance physio there. And the goal is to not have the head coach get fired. And the goal is for my kids, I work a lot with a women's water polo team, and I travel with them. And this is important. I'll come back around to the thing. I know I'm just throwing balls in the air, but if you can't see what it's like to do your work with a group of people over and over and over through a period of time, you can't actually see what works. You're just on the internet repeating something you heard some experts say. And I'm like, hey, okay, we're in Indiana. We got to go shop at the local Save Mart to figure out what we're going to feed our kids because breakfast at the hotel is not effective, and our games are at the real weird time. And suddenly you see that your perfect, highly decorative room just falls apart, right? And so we need to figure out what is working, and that lens of performance makes a difference. So as we come out of, you're right, the other side of highly decorative, really fun movement, which is identity, which is play, which is hobby. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just want to make sure we're not conflating the two things. So you're absolutely right. We saw, I was in Germany, I don't know, teaching at one of the Perform Better summits. And I was like, hey, we're just going to do a workout here, real simple. And it destroyed people because all they were doing was corrective exercise, functional movement training. And I was like, your functional movement training does not withstand the disciplines of high heart rate. It does not withstand the discipline of load or changing environment or having to perceive and catch a ball in a weird position. And what you can see is that's really great movement practice. And like, let me introduce you to Pilates. That's super cool. Like, it's going to be great, but that is not the same thing as standing up and doing something extraordinary with your body. And all we have to do is go into actual sports and start asking the question, are you in actual sports? I need to see your work and I need to see what your results are. And otherwise, your video that you're doing in the commercial gym where you're lecturing me about something, even though you're not coaching anyone, you're not developing anyone, you haven't been responsible for their health and wellness, for months and months and years, I'm like, I think your thinking is incomplete. Hard to say that in 60 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Ido is like the perfect example of like, I don't think people realize like he's a freak. He's an absolute freak. He's like 6% body fat, just like an absolute animal. And they see someone like I really like Joel Smith's like way of he talks about like the feminine side of training and the masculine side of training and like trying to find a balance. But they see like some of his feminine side of training, and you see so many people like, yes, that's the answer. Again, they go full movement yogi there. And it's like, okay, you're missing the masculine side of Ido's training, where he's an animal. Like some of the squats that he does, some of the like the barbell stuff that he does and is capable of doing, like he has that as well. So when he spends a little bit of time on the feminine and a little bit of time on the elastic, a little bit of time on moving your body and feeling good, it works for him because he has that balance. Or if he's not balanced now, and maybe like Ido is like kind of confused this. I haven't listened to a lot of his stuff recently, but like his old stuff where it's like he has the balance of a massive base of a masculine, massive base of like power and just being a freak and having a muscular base. And now he's starting to implement some of these other things into the equation that do help and can make a difference. But again, I think a lot of people see the new, the shiny, the fun, and they're like, that's the answer. That's like, I just got to go do those things. Like you're missing the point. He's 6%
100%.
body fat and an absolute animal.
A mutant. And I want to just be clear, if you're listening to this, I'm very clear. I'm not throwing shade at a coach or talking about a coach's methodologies without that coach in front of me. So I'm not going to discuss, like, I'm not shading. What I'm saying is his reaction to what was happening in strength and conditioning at the time was an honest reaction of saying, hey, I think we're missing some things if all we're doing is training wattage and capacity. Otherwise, let's just put you on a Kaiser machine, right? Let's just put you on a bike where we can measure wattage and just go up and down as fast as we can. And that is not the same thing as athleticism, as problem solving, as developing these skills. There's a reason why, I make everyone who works with me throw and catch a tennis ball all the time as part of our warm up, because I want us to play. I want us to chase. I want us to react. Part of maybe this is the warm up, because we're still going to have to front squat and sprint. Some of the warm up things, I think I can take some of those, we'll call them feminine ideas, and say, hey, you're right. We weren't doing our athletes service by making them athletic or preparing them in the weight room. And this really comes back to the idea of what is our intention in training people and what do I need to get done? We're back to Cal Dietz. He gets as much physiologic response as he can in the smallest amount of time and the minimalist dose. And because he knows that his athletes still have to go out and practice 20 hours a week, right? And do all the other things. So, what's interesting is unless I'm with you and facing your athletes, with the tools that you have, understanding their training age, understanding what their goals are, I'm probably not going to comment on your program because I'm going to trust that this hyper local effect is that you know the people in front of you and know how to have a relationship with them and motivate them to be vulnerable, to take risks, to try new things, to show their weaknesses. And this gym environment is the last, I'll say training environment is the last safe place in sports. You're not gonna make the team or not make the team because your bench sucks, right? Like we're going to be able to find your holes and plug them and make you trust your body and manage pain there. And it's the best scaffolding to support humans going out into the world. So I think we have this opportunity, but let's trust these coaches in front of us who are working diligently with a group of people that they know intimately.
Dude, I love that thought process of like the training ground being the last like little safe space in like fitness and movements. And it's like, dude, even like in a lot of the agility stuff and the small sided games that we play, like a big reason we play that stuff, like what I realized, and we were doing it when I was in the college sector too, it's like taking risk athletically in practice, especially in the college sector and like a football team, and like every rep your job is on the line, whether it's in a game or a practice. It's like you're messing up, you're trying something new. It's like you're exploring some of these things, and which practice should be. The coaches are so stressed and their jobs are on the line at all moments that if you're trying to take risks, you're trying to grow, you're trying to develop a new movement pattern, a new movement skill, and you're failing. It's like this dude's failing, next guy up. You have 100 guys on the roster, next guy up. And there's like never a spot in which, okay, we are going to develop new skills. A lot of it turns into like, I'm going to hold on to the strength I already have so that, and it's like this like battle for mediocrity, and the freaks that like that are freaks, they survive and they excel at practice. And that's the thing you see too. Like I was having conversations with these sport coaches, like everybody hypes up Patrick Mahomes, right? All of his weird throws, all of his off balance throws, all this like creative stuff he's doing on the thing. Then you have an athlete in practice do those things, and they're going to yell at him the entire time, like ball up, like here, everything. And it's like, okay, look at the disconnect there. Like you're praising this one guy for being a creative solver of movement problems, and then as soon as your athlete starts to get in those settings, like you shame it and you tell him he's going to lose his job. And it's like, I think there needs to be a middle ground in which there's still a technical component. Like let in any of the rowing, any of the track activities, water polo, football, like there is constraints in the sport in which they need to follow, and there's certain things they need to be able to do. You can't throw all of that out and just say, okay, it's just a playground, we're just going to go have fun out here, right? Like there is constraints, there are things that matter. You need to score points, you need to win the game, while also balancing the fact that there needs to be a part in which you can grow and develop and learn some of these moves. And if you don't have a spot for that, and I think practice has been kind of removed, even in the high school setting, man. Now it's like there's so much pressure in the high school setting, and now it's not even high school, it's middle school with all the travel ball stuff. It's like there's no spot in which you are actually exploring and working on developing new skill sets, and we never take any risk as athletes, because then like you can't fault the athlete. Like you're going to fault an athlete for not taking a risk when you're telling them they're going to lose their job because of that risk. It's like I do think there needs to be a spot in which they can work on these things that is kind of being taken away from these athletes.
Could not agree more with that whole rant. And when I people who are listening to this and people who are in my universe, you're going to go watch Austin's coaching, and you're going to watch guys jumping sideways and twisting over high hurdles and landing barefoot and then rolling and having to sprint. And this is the kinds of physical training and development it's actually lost. And I think we start to see some type 1 errors in our system of development. For example, an hour may or may not be enough time to actually have athletes come in, wake up, see each other, bro out, sister out, listen to some music, do some fun games, get strong, play some short-sided games, right? So we've constrained, like, I got to get a lot done in an hour. So what do I start cutting because the next team is coming in? Number one. Number two, we have eroded the base of athletic foundation. I grew up, everyone, I know I'm 52. I was born in the late 1900s, and I grew up in Southern Germany, and we worshiped the kid that was like the best athlete. She could outski us, out mountain bike us, out soccer us, out, playground us. We did everything. And some of that was a function of not having TV. I grew up without a TV, of having to ride my bike to school through the woods because that's how I got to school. And in some of the access was that I was able to develop a lot of capacity and a lot of problem solving with my nervous system early on that, I was lucky to be exposed to certain sports, et cetera, et cetera. And then simultaneously now go ahead and if you look at some of our processes, they were built on the fact that kids could problem solve with their bodies. And now with this hyper specialization, plus, as you say, this lack of freedom to mess up, to innovate, to take risk because it's punished or there's no tolerance for it. I mean, just watch the new SEC documentary and see what a practice looks like. You drop one ball, boom, you're in the back of the line, right? So the pressure, I can't take risks. So where does that happen? Where are we going to foundationally put that back in? And for me, it is the training environment where we are playing spike ball and we're playing games and we're letting the best athlete solve new problems and we're letting other people start to take their training wheels off their athleticism. And then when you layer that on top of freak capacity, and I mean, you have risks that are like my ankles and, of course, underlying this is a lot of people don't realize what it's like to actually work with true mutants who can do anything better and faster than you can. And, when we start putting those things together, what ends up happening is that we have people who enjoy the process, who don't get burned out, who are better prepared, where the coach is like, I don't know what you're doing, Austin, but my athletes come out of the gym and they are stoked and connected and fired up and they trust themselves and they can take risk and they're so good. And so we have to look at the training environment differently now, as this is a place to do remedial skill development and play and take risk, because we don't film every single thing. And, you pointed out that, man, we film a lot of practice and we go back and we watch every rep. And I don't get to see your fifth rep on the, your heavy clean or your jump or your capacity. I want to see what's going on there in this natural way. So you're absolutely right. The key here is that the proof is in the pudding. And, I was speaking at the CSCS a couple years ago, and fortunately, I was in a room full of like 1,000 coaches right after Cal Dietz, like the worst spot you could possibly be in as a lecturer. And I was like, great, this is great. I'm just going to bore everyone. But I walked up and down and I literally was like, how many people have coached someone longer than 4 years? Some hands go up because they have fifth year seniors. And I'm like 6 years and the hands drop off by 70%. And I'm like, who's been responsible for someone's athletic development for 10 years? And like 2 hands go up. And what you can see is that I have an 18-year-old who can buffer a lot. And it doesn't matter how they squat because it's a low power movement and they don't really get injured squatting that often. And so I don't really own any of the outcomes a little bit. I can just pretend like my little universe is my little universe and there's another 18-year-old kid coming in.
Yeah, that's so far. And just again, I think a big part of it, like we talk a lot about like meeting athletes where they're at and then totally ignore like meeting athletes where they're at culturally and like what they're actually growing up in and in their background. We meet athletes where they're at like for the 4 years, like you're talking about, instead of the 40 years that they're going to be in this athletic movement-based space. And I think that's important. But one of the things we're talking about is like athletes taking risk. And like coaches will talk about athletes taking risks all the time. And then when it comes to coaches themselves taking a risk, man, it is non-existent. Like we preach all this mental toughness stuff. We preach all this like being confident in yourself and doing these things. And it like never happens to the actual coach that is preaching these things. And one of the cool things is like we talked about how like you took a risk putting out the Supple Leopard. You took a risk creating some of the new movements like patterns that you're talking about, and even some of the products. Like I like doing some of the products and creation there. Like how do you balance like the mad scientist aspect of like taking a risk as a strength coach, being like, okay, I have this idea. I think it's going to work, but like, you're not really sure if it's 100% going to work. But like, if you're only doing things you're 100% sure are going to work, it's like, you're just going to be parroting everything else that has always been said before you. And you're never actually going to, again, take that risk and hopefully unlock something new. So like, what is that process like for you of taking that risk, trying a new idea, working on something like a philosophy or a thought process, or maybe even a product in your head of like, I think this could be something good. And then the balance of, did this work? Did this not work? Do I keep this? Do I not keep this? Like what's that look like for you?
I think, I was talking with Rob Wilson, who just put a wonderful book out called Check Engine Light. He's an old coaching friend of mine. We've been like coaching since 2008 together and working together. And one of the things that we were talking about yesterday was something that's sort of tacit to my education, my experience, which is test and retest. So every single day you're working with yourself or an athlete. I'm basically making a hypothesis and then I'm testing my hypothesis. And your hypothesis might be 5x5 back squat, like as boring as it can possibly be, at this load. That's my hypothesis, that my athletes are prepared in this moment and warmed up where they're going to be able to handle this volume at this load. And then I'm going to test that. And when you start to put test, retest, and sort of hypothetical thinking into your process, like what I love, if you, again, we'll just use you as a sort of case study, because hopefully everyone's listening is familiar with watching what you're doing, is that you can see the games develop. I can see your thinking expanding. I can see you discard things that you didn't like. And we were like, that was terrible. That didn't work at all. Like my hypothesis is we're going to play this short-sided game. And well, that short-sided game sucked. My guys weren't motivated. We didn't get the speed we wanted. It wasn't fun. Like we didn't compete. Like that sucked. And it just goes away. And so, what's nice is that if you walk in sort of with great humility every day and great curiosity every day, you're never bored. If you're bored, shame on you, because there is a fun new way to warm up. I'll point at Rhett Larson, who's done such a wonderful job. His idea of no zombies is his concept of, why are you doing the same warm up? Why don't you, athletes need novelty, and deadlifting and snatching is not novel. So let's go ahead and create some novelty in our warm up and play and activation and exposure. And this idea of kind of coming in and putting the onus on you to stretch your thinking, to try something a little bit, iterative. Last year, I travel with this nationally ranked elite women's water polo team. And we have some of the best athletes in the world in water polo on this team. They're real, real good. And one of the things that I identified before our warmups for big games, we're playing some of the others, like super savages. I mean, Stanford is unbelievable. And I was like, hey, I want more contact with my athletes. I want us to have some game contact. How can we wrestle a little bit? And I'm inheriting 24 to 26 women who came through a process where they're not used to non-water contact. And I don't want to swim down and when the first whistle blows, and that's the first time I've interacted with someone. That doesn't work. One of the things that's a hallmark of our program right now is that we're going to rip your face off in the first quarter. Second quarter, everyone really starts to warm up and gets good, and you can really start to see it. But our first quarter, you should not match us. Like you can't. We're better prepared. We're better warmed up. Simultaneously, for the last 3 seasons, I have 100% of my athletes available for the NCAA finals. We don't have shoulder pain. We don't have, what is that about? Well, that's just about smart, being lucky, good nutrition, smart warm-up, smart recovery, right? Letting these durable, badass athletes do their thing. Simultaneously, recognizing that, hey, I want to get some contact in here. How am I going to do that? And I look around, I'm like, what would be really great? Flag football belts. So I buy 24 flag football belts off of Amazon, and they are cheap, everybody. And when you watch athletes compete to rip a belt off another athlete and push and bump, like other teams peek around the corner and they're like, what the hell is going on over here? And our girls are like, bro, in a brawl, just trying to rip the flag off each other, and then I'm like, oh, 1-on-1. Oh, now you can only use your right arm. Now you got to hold hands. Now it's 2-on-1. Like it's infinite variation there, but it's my curiosity to say, hey, this contact drill, my women, didn't like wrestling for the medicine ball. They didn't enjoy that. They felt that was like, they didn't like it. So I was like, cool, I can take that feedback. And I was like, I come up with another way to solve the same problem. And I think that's really the model for, can I be curious? Can I be innovative? Can I not just entertain my athletes, but have my outcome in a way that feels gamified and actually does the thing, which sets us up So when you swim down the first quarter and meet us, you are overwhelmed with our preparation.
Yeah, man, that is so good. You're talking about like the ego. What was the type A thing? You said it's like death
Oh,
by
type
type.
one error. That remember, type one error is just a foundational error in our thinking, right? So the two that I was talking about is one, that an hour can be enough, or an hour has to be an hour, and number two, that our athletes are actually athletes and not specialists when they come into the weight room.
Yeah, and like having that, like I just think, and I fell into this myself as a coach. It's like being when I was the like first time strength coach. It's like you want to have the answers. You want people to like. That's why, and they like just this. The lack of admittance of a coach of like why you became a coach in the first place is like it's crazy to me. Like it because it like it sounds bad, but it's like you became a coach because like you liked when you had the answers. Like you liked when people came to you, like that type of thing, and you wanted to fix these things. You wanted to do these things, and you have to realize like the best way to have the answer is to actually explore the answer, not to just pretend like you have the answer. Like you're just spreading, oh, this is going to sound terrible, but spreading misinformation. You know, like you're just making things up rather than just being in the moment, being like, okay, I thought that med ball drill was sick. It wasn't. Okay, that doesn't mean I'm a bad coach. It does. I was looking for an answer with you guys. You gave me the information back that it wasn't the answer. I can come up with a different solution, and it's like it can be so easy as that. But like your first time doing that as a coach, where it's like, fuck, I'm supposed to have all these answers. I'm supposed to be the wisdom person. I'm supposed to have this thing. And when you refuse to admit you don't have the answers, you never get the answers. You never actually like develop anything. You just continue to bullshit yourself and your athletes. And some coaches, man, some coaches are really good at that. If you have some charisma, like you can do. I'm not the most charismatic person, but I have enough charisma. Like for my first 2 to 3 years of coaching, like that was me, man. I was charismatic enough and I was confident enough to like get away with my own bullshit because I would just like basically come up with bullshit and like talk my way out of these. And I got to a point, I'm like, man, I'm not actually looking for the answer. I just pretend like I have the answer. And like I had to realize like, okay, let's actually take this information in. And again, it doesn't mean you switch up all your philosophies. Like sometimes athletes are going to come to you, say something like, I don't want to squat. It's like, okay, well, we're still going to squat. Like that's bad information. We're going to talk about this. We're going to educate you. We're going to do this. But like, again, the other things where it's like, it doesn't really matter how we get done, like the physical prep done. We can switch this up. We can change it. And you're talking about the Amazon flag football belts. I'm going to double that. If you guys haven't bought Amazon flag football belts for $20, you're missing out on the cheapest, best piece of equipment you can have in your gym. But and you also mentioned like if you're bored, that's on you. I think that's another thing that like coaches pride themselves on. Like I'm a they always say this thing like it's like but it's backed up by ego. Like it's not true. It's like they say like I'm a servant coach. Like I'm doing it for my athletes. Like, it's all right if I'm bored during the session. It's like okay, Jordan Peterson talks about like this. If you're bored writing something, imagine how bored your readers are. It's like if you're bored coaching a session, do you know how fucking bored your athletes are running that session, guys? Like terribly bored. You should not be bored. Like that's a direct indicator on how alive your session actually is. And it's okay to make a session fun for yourself. Like it's okay to do these things for yourself because if you're making it fun for yourself, I guarantee it's way more fun for your athletes. And I just think a lot of coaches refuse to admit these things. Like they have this like philosophical block of like they back it up with this like servant type attitude, but it's like a servant type attitude fueled by an ego of I don't want to be wrong, I don't want to like risk or experiment here.
Couldn't agree more. It's one of the reasons that I'm like, hey, what are you doing for yourself? How are you being vulnerable? When is the last time you were vulnerable, where you had to compete, where you had to, and I'm not saying you have to be the best athlete in the room. I think it's really important that coaches actually train and their athletes see them suffer and make mistakes and get buried. And not again, that can be whatever you want it to be. If you're in your 60s, I don't expect you to be, snatching, a lot, but I do expect you to be training in a way or engage in something where you're reminding yourself what it's like to be vulnerable. And it is sometimes, I coach, I have these 19 and 20-year-old superstars I'm around, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? How come you don't have the confidence of a white cis hetero man who has competed in 2 national teams and has been all over the world? And I'm like, you guys are the most legit people I've ever met. But part of my job is to have them trust themselves, trust this responsibility, develop a relationship, give feedback. And one of the things that I think that coaches often don't do is they're not coached by other coaches. So here's something I'd recommend. If you're in a coaching environment once a week, someone is going to run the program and you're going to do the program. And if you don't like the cooking, shut the fuck up and eat the cooking. So I'm like, oh, great. It's Austin's day. Like, I know I'm going to be running in a circle and jumping over shit and snatching. I'm like, okay, because I'm a coach and I can scale that appropriately. But I want you to show up and put yourself in the shoes of an athlete who's coming in, who's worried about class, who's worried about being too tired, who's worried about, hey, I did this before and I got tweaked and I couldn't do my job and I lost my position. You need to be some vulnerable. The other thing that I think is crucial is that there is feedback around feedback with your athletes. How'd you like that? I didn't like that at all. Tell me more about that. And again, not defensive. Tell me more. And like, oh, I just breathed really hard. I'm like, well, I really like that. So suck it up. Yeah. But, one of the things is that I'm in after our game warmups, for example, which are very high stake, right? We're playing for a national title. We're doing all these things. There are enough coaches around me where we huddle afterwards and we're like, that sucked. Let's do that. Remember, we got to do this next time. And so there is a feedback loop in there built in to your own stuff, because otherwise you really will just believe your own bullshit.
Oh, 100%. And like losing, I think you need to lose as a strength coach too. Like, I think that's one of the best things about softball, man, is like you do all like, if you there was a time period where it's like, I wasn't really like putting I was lifting a little bit. I was posting stuff on social media, but it wasn't like never put my balls on the line of like, okay, does this stuff work or not? And you would go to like a softball tournament and get shown up by a dude smoking a cigarette. And you're like, bro, what is happening? Like, he's smoking a dart at the plate and he hits the ball harder than me, hits the ball better than me. Like, something I'm saying doesn't make sense. What is it? Like, and this opening yourself up to those answers, I think is unbelievably powerful. And again, like you were saying, like when you are the man, when you become the head strength coach, when you become the person, if you're never putting yourself into a feedback loop in which you can get responses, you can set yourself up in a life where for 20 years you are never told you were wrong.
Yeah. Completely agreed. And, one of the things that I want, I am a coach first. I happen to be a physio second. My wife probably thinks I'm just an average physio with average skills. She's like, you're really good at giving people permission to move. She's like, that's your secret weapon, is that you give people agency over their bodies. But, one of the things that I see is that people are not out there looking at what's possible and not critiquing it, but trying to ask, what problem is this coach trying to solve with this? And is that useful for me? And again, like, I don't mean to shit on anything here. But like tib raises for something for me is something that I don't prioritize very much unless someone has wicked hot weak feet and shins. Otherwise, and again, that's might be some assistance work, very useful tool. But I'm like, hey, I just don't think you're doing any deceleration, doing long jumping, and you haven't cut. And this is one of the reasons why your legs are so weak. So we can take this vitamin or we could eat the meal. And again, the idea here is not to poop on any exercise or any training methodology, but to go in and say, what is this problem being solved for? What fundamental shapes, how would I integrate this into my system? Do I have time? And what am I going to cut? Because at some point it becomes so cluttered that you can't see inputs and outputs. And there's so many laundry lists of things to do that we forgot that the whole point was to develop some general physical capacities that transfer, that are novel. And, what does that do? So am I just putting 1,000 decorative exercises in? So anytime you're on the internet watching, and again, this is how I found you, I'm watching, I'm like, oh, look at this. This is interesting. I love this. This is playing. Maybe it's just confirmation bias. I like the way he's training. I love these games. You give me ideas. I love that your guys are jumping and playing barefoot. I think I just made a post about your guys running around, jumping, playing barefoot. And, the idea here is that I go in and I really am like, hey, I don't know anything, but I'm trying to understand what this coach is doing because they're giving me a glimpse of how they're thinking. And that's what the internet is for. It's not for arguing about my Kung Fu style better than your Kung Fu style.
So you talk about like, did you have an epiphany moment of like trying to find that balance for yourself as somebody like you're talking about the freedom to move and like, we still need to balance that with like principles or like products or something like, especially with somebody that has created products. Like, how do you find the balance of like tools and like when to use the tools, when to use the principles, when to use the foam roller, when to use like a banded stretch with the principles of like, okay, there are like when to use like doesn't mean basic like what doesn't mean that vitamins are bad, right? Doesn't mean like I take vitamins all the time, right? Take supplements all the time. Well, you're still eating that meal. Like, what was there a balance point? Like, and when does it become kind of scammy? Because I think like now that there's products out there, it kind of switched into a like ATG type method of now we're not like, and I talked about this on a podcast with Jeffrey Wolf last week too, where it's like ATG started off like Ben Patrick, the whole movement was started off as like it's okay to move in these non-optimal, more range of motion type ways. Like they popularize like a Jefferson curl. They popularize like you can push your knees over your toes. You can move in some of these exploration ways. And then it turned into a full-on product, a full-on business. And now it's like instead of the old way of thinking was you can't move in any of these ways because they're all dangerous. They were like, no, you can. And now it moved into, no, you can only move in these certain ways. It's like the same exact extreme they were fighting against at the start. And now they're just trapping people into like four movement patterns are the only movement patterns that matter. Like tib raises, the only ones that matter, you know? Like now we kind of lost that balance. Like how did you have a balance moment of that? Like, because one of the quotes that I loved, I think it was on the Huberman podcast. You were talking about like, we've over accessorized the gym. Like we've made like, there's just too many things like thrown at these athletes and too many special exercises and too many things. Like, how do you use the vitamins and take the mineral, and eat the meal together?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And really comes down to, ultimately my doctoral work was looking at barriers to adherence. What keeps people from doing what they say they're going to do? Basically, how do we have outcomes where people do the thing? And in that thinking, what you really see ultimately is that we need to be masters of communication. How effectively can I communicate and have my athletes feel seen and need and heard and all these things and give feedback and create an environment? Like I just need to be an expert at that and constantly refining that, thinking about that. And anytime I leave a session, I literally just like people are like, are you mad? I'm like, no, I'm just shutting down like 3PO so I can process what I just did. Right. And so tomorrow I suck less. And I probably owe an apology to the adults that I started teaching to whitewater kayak when I was 14. Probably wasn't super good back then, but I was really earnest. So same thing. I expect you to get a better version of me tomorrow than you got today. So communication is a big deal. And the second one is really looking at when and where are people going to do all this stuff. And I think that's really what the concept is, the kludge, where you have a piece of software and then you put another piece of software on it and another piece of software. And then pretty soon, the thing works. It's inelegant. It's not effective. It's chunky, but it's not a streamlined thinking. You can't see. And I think, I forget who the writer was who talked about it as informed simplicity, where you can have all of these different pieces that seemingly don't relate but really what we want to do is create these overlapping sections where we start to see the human as a complex system, and you can see what's what through that informed simplicity. So what we realized early on was that let's just get the foam rollers out of the gym for most of the work and let's put it in front of the TV in the evening. And what we found was everyone has 10 minutes in the night before they went to bed, and our soft tissue work went through the roof. People could do it safely at home. They weren't like humping the foam roller at the gym. We could use the gym foam roller or guns to be like, hey, something hurts, go hit it for a couple minutes, see if we can desensitize it so we can go squat. So our athletes were like, oh, this is a tool so that I can quickly do the thing I need to do. And we created kind of space for that. Hey, I need you to get here early enough to be able to say what hurts. And once we're warmed up, anyone got any hot spots that we need to address real quick for 3 minutes? Otherwise, all of this restoration, recovery, soft tissue mobilization, we just put it in the end. And part of our deal then is to also ask. So for example, I go over to the university once a week and I have sort of open office hours where I teach athletes. I don't work on them. I teach them to work on each other. Everyone has movement minimums. They understand what normative range is. My athletes can put hands on each other. They can mobilize. They can do soft tissue work. They stand. And what we found was that was a nice discrete thing where kids who needed it could come in and ask for it. And it wasn't some mandated thing that took away from the thing. And I think that's really what we want to make sure is that we're not taking away from the thing. So look, voodoo floss is fantastic. Your knee is swollen. Great. Here's a chunk of voodoo floss for the rest of class. For the rest of the day, I want you to wrap that thing for 1 minute and we're going to try to get 30 1-minute sessions in. But you can do that while you're sitting in class, while you're reading, while you're watching the TV. And what I did was I said, hey, let's make sure that we decelerate or democratize or delineate what's essential and where we're going to put those things. Because what I don't want to do is voodoo floss your knee prior to you, because I want you to be able to squat. And I want to respect your time. And if we're all in here with these special tools to get this special thing done, where else can we start to put some of these other things? And that made it a lot easier. And then more importantly, I'll always believe that athletes will do what works if you give them a taste, and they will stop doing what doesn't work. And if you show an athlete how to feel better, she will come in and do that automatically. You don't have to reinforce that.
Yeah, there's so many good points there, and it's such like I love the kind of, it's like a direct tie to like Dr. Tommy John's approach to like movement too, but it's like it's not like I think we kind of fall into the trap of like it's only the 1 hour a day you're in the gym, right? It's like movement is like throughout your life, especially if your goal is to be an elite athlete, and like programming that homework is a big piece of doing these things. And again, one of the things that I really try to do with my athletes is like expose them to as many tools as I can. Tools that have worked for me, tools that have worked for other athletes, and then have them pick the 5 to 10 tools that work for them. But like, just educate them on a tool. Don't just, I just think so many people they get a new shiny hammer, and it's like, I have to use this hammer for every single thing I'm doing. And it's like, we're missing the point, man. It's like, it doesn't matter what the tool is. It matters what the job requires and which tool is required for that job and that athlete specifically.
I have this, there's a great physio friend of mine. He's at the BFR Pro, just, full mark there. And Nick created this thing called Sport Grip. And it's looks like a lightsaber handle. And then you can tighten down and create resistance with this kind of cool grip. And I don't do a lot of grip training because my athletes are grabbing things all the time. But if I found that I had an athlete who couldn't pull onto the bar, sure, it could be there. But this thing is beautiful if someone has a hot elbow or hot tendinopathy, because I can hand it to them and be like 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. Oh, here's some BFR cuffs, right? And now I have this tool where I can get someone taking care of themselves, rotating, creating range. I won't pull it out unless someone has a hot elbow. You know what I mean? And so what's nice is that as you start to coach, and it takes a hot second to become worth a shit at your job, you'll say, I have a solution when something pops up. And we want to do that. We don't need to cover all the things all the time. What we need to do is say, hey, we have principles that guide when someone can't do something or is having a problem. And everyone knows this already. So let me give everyone an example. If you're listening, you're confused. When someone has pain, the first thing we ask is, can we desensitize that? With percussion, with isometrics, can I just tell the brain it's safe? Put some input in, suddenly, hey, it doesn't hurt anymore, coach. Great, let's go low, right? Warmups are part of that magic, right? We often ask, okay, can I desensitize that? Can I decongest it? Is it just swollen because you swam 10,000 yards and then you sacked in front of the computer in class all day long? That's an error, that you just didn't evacuate the congestion. You just threw 100 pitches and now you're just sitting there back on the sticks playing video games. No wonder your elbow's fucking pissed. You got to pump that shit out and, get the garbage out and groceries in. So we can decongest that. And oftentimes just getting swelling out through biking, through play, through walking, through compression, jumping Normatec boots, whatever tool you have, that can make athletes not be in pain. Then we say, does that thing just benefit from blood flow? Well, welcome to warm up again. Welcome to BFR. Welcome to doing, just getting that thing pumped up, a pre-pump before we load, right? And then the last thing is we always look at range of motion. So I suddenly have a tool set to say, can I desensitize this? Can I decongest it? Can I get more blood flow in there? I'm checking range of motion. And then I ask, when and where are you going to do that? What tools are you comfortable with? What tools do you like? Great. Let's do those tools underneath that principle and ask, what tools do you have? When can the athlete do it? When does this work? And you'll see that you can solve these problems very quickly. If you're not in that lane, you're like, hey, an athlete is sucking at this drill. We have isometrics for a reason. We slow you down and make you pause squat so you own that bottom position, right? What about this thing called tempo? What's that about? Oh, you got to show me you can do it slowly under load before we start adding speed to it. And I think those tools, you already own those. so that you can drop in a tool that are just general tools with whatever you're doing anytime. So I got a room full of 30 athletes, no problem. Boom, over there on squat rack 3. And again, you can hear me because the music's not so high that I have to shout over the music, right? I'm like, hey, I need you to drop in some tempos until that starts to look better, right? And then the athlete feels better, starts to reconnect, and then we add speed again.
Yes, man. And it's like the core principle. I was meeting with an athlete yesterday for a consult, and she was telling me that she's been doing the mobility stuff before bed, right? And she's like, man, it's like I'm feeling so much better doing this mobility stuff before bed. I feel like I'm sleeping better. I feel like my body feels better. But my coaches were telling me like it doesn't matter and like I need to skip it. I'm just wasting all my time. And I was like, girl, does it work for you? She's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, then everything else that you're being told is stupid. Like, it's stupid. Does it work for you? Do you feel better? Do you perform better doing this stuff? Does the tool work? Does the tool build the desk? If yes, okay, why are we arguing that it's not good or bad? And like the lack of confidence so many athletes have in themselves now because of the age of information, like we're spammed with so much stuff. And it's like, I told her too, I was like, if I tell you something doesn't work or I tell you something does work and you do it and I'm wrong, I'm the idiot, not you. Like that, and that's okay. Like again, I just think we lost a lot of. I don't even know if it's common sense. I just think it's faith in like our own like human ability to know, like common sense of did it work or did it not. And then if the answer is yes or if the answer is no, it's an N of one study. Listen to that. Like that matters. That's important. That's what we want to do. And I think so many athletes have just kind of lost that faith, and because there's so many big heads on the internet. And again, like you and I can be considered one of them. Like you and I can say something that works for a lot of our athletes. It doesn't work for somebody else. And it's like, then we are the idiots. You know what I mean? It's not that we're purposely trying to be one. It's just like, it doesn't
100%.
work for you. And that's all that matters.
And we're going to name this thing, and it's called serial anecdotal empiricism, which means I have an N of 1 times a million. I have like, does this work? Yes or no? Is it observable, measurable, repeatable? Like, you have some pre-game dance routine that allows you to lock in. Guess what? I don't touch that. I'm like, I believe you, right? And that doesn't work for this athlete. It works for your athlete. Like we were at MPSF. It's like our big, league championships a couple years ago. And we're in Indiana and we're playing for the finals. And some coaches were walking by, watching our warm-up. And they start to be like, oh, we got some girls playing hacky sack. Some girls are playing Frisbee. I got footballs out. We're doing dance circle. Some women are stretching, doing the things from their national teams, right? And then we come together and we're doing resisted sprints and we throw hard against the wall and we catch and we create this drill I call the cow drill where we get 3 kids holding on to a big, thick rubber band, right? Like a big jump stretch band. And then we just throw the ball. And you have to end up trying to be creative about how you're catching and throwing the ball. Meanwhile, your friends are jerking you into weird positions. You're getting yanked. You're resisting. You're balancing. You got to pay attention. You're flowing. People are laughing and sweating. And I can tell that my athletes are ready because their tops come off. They're down in their sports bras and they're ready to fight. They're just drenched in sweat. And you could see all of these other coaches who had stopped and literally sat on the grass. We're like, what's happening here? I don't even understand what's happening here. Number one, athletes could identify what they needed to do to lock in and feel good. Some of that was hacky sack. Some of that was dance. Some of that was making TikTok videos, dancing, right? Some of it was throwing. Some of it was more formal. And then number two, the preparation is diverse and fun enough that when we walk in as a squad, and even our chant at the end of our warm-up feels like a haka, where it's affirmation, it's gnarly. Everyone's like a little bit scared of this. And to your point, it's really important that we abandon this patriarchal model where you do what I say. This is not Remember the Titans football league. Like, you are in a dialogue with your athletes, and expert clinicianship and expert coaching is always a compromise between what you think is best for you and what I think is best for you. And together, we are on a mission together. And I think when we make that shift, again, that fundamental shift of athletes are there for your understanding so you can do better tomorrow. And secondarily, we're in conversation with our athletes. They're part of this feedback. Hey, can we do that one drill again? You bet, right? Hey, I really felt great after that. And let me give you a simple example. one of my good buddies, who is now director of performance for the New York Liberty WNBA team. He's their med director. He was a strength coach for the Warriors. And then he went to physio school because he realized he wanted to do both things. And there was a famous player on that team who infamously did not like to train. And so Curtis finally gets that athlete to train. And the athlete says to Curtis, hey, man, when I bench press, I always feel like I play great basketball. And you know what our legit strength coach said? It was like, let's bench press. And then that athlete comes back and is like, man, every time I work with you, I feel great. Thank you so much. I'll be back tomorrow. And all our coach did was say, hey, what do you feel like you need to do to be the world's best athlete? Maybe we should do that before we play. And this feedback made that coach look like a genius, made the athlete feel like they had buy-in, and pretty soon we have this mutual trust where we can then take the next step together. And I think that's a really good example of, hey, look, 19-year-olds don't have all the answers. They want to but how many great coaches Jochum would have Pump Out Friday, where, he would come in and some athletes wanted to power clean, and someone wanted to curl, and some of them wanted to do hamstring raises or, curls. And he would be like, what do you need to do to go play incredible football the next day? And they would come in and it would be a fun thing, And I just think we want to create that opportunity to say, hey, I'm in service and in conversation with you. What do we need to do to help us together go and be extraordinary?
Dude, isn't it wild, the power of having a conversation with your athletes?
Oh my God.
It's like so many of these podcasts where I have like really expert level coaches on. It comes down to like, yeah, I talked to my athlete and oh my, like that should be, but it's like it turns into a dictatorship very, very quickly.
And look, I get that. Like, hey, just go ahead and be a D3 strength coach. You only have 9 teams. You've got 3 sessions. Like, you are maxed. And it's going to be real hard to make sure that you are prioritized, organized, prepped, get the feedback, measure what needs to be measured. I'll give you another example. We have a wonderful new strength coach at Berkeley right now. And this was the test that the women did. I have some really good, like, world champion medalists, like the really good women on our team. And they were like, hey, I know weights are at 7, but we like to warm up a little bit. And the coach was like, oh, what time do you want me to get there? And they were like, well, if we were there at 6:30, would you be there? And she's like, yeah. And they were like, well, if we wanted to get there at 6, would you be there? And then she's like, yeah, tell me what time you want to be there. And the women were like, oh my God, this coach is facilitating what we need. And this coach had instant buy-in because she's like, you want to get there at 5:30? Because that's what we need to do. I'm there. I mean, that's a pretty extraordinary. That coach isn't getting paid for that. It's a big drag to get there even earlier. And in, contrast to a former coach who's like, weight room starts at 7, I'll be there at 6:59. You can hear suddenly that like, oh, you're not on this journey with us in that conversation. And that perception, that relationship, it takes 2 seconds to break, and it can take years to build that trust and buy-in. And when you do that appropriately, your athletes will do anything you both agree to. And it's pretty extraordinary how vulnerable they'll get.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Being on the journey with the athletes. And I think that big part of that is like, again, what we were talking about, putting yourself, being vulnerable, having them watch you actually train for something too. Like it's a massive piece of the puzzle. The last part I wanted to talk to you about before we head off here. I love the like mad scientist that you have of like the creation of your actual products, right? Like the voodoo floss, some of the
You're talking about the split squat pad, please? My greatest idea.
like the actual creation of a product, like that is so different than actually just coaching. Like obviously you're solving problems in like creating these products, but like the actual, like, so many coaches see problems, so many coaches like want an answer, but it's not the actual like, okay, I'm going to create something to solve this problem. What is that side of your brain like? Like how does that work? What's that process? Like, did you have epiphanies like, oh my God, I see this in my head and I got to go create this? Like I'm super interested in that kind of side of the thing of world.
Well, I'll tell you, I think number one, no one exists in a vacuum. It's very useful that Katie and Bill Henniger have been friends of mine for 20 years. The founders of Rogue Fitness, right? So if I have a crazy wonky idea, they can help me, right? The kids at AbMat have a wonderful process that if you have a good idea, they'll help you bring it to life. So if you have something, there are companies out there making stuff that can really help you. I am not a manufacturer. I'm not like, that's not what I do. But again, this open idea of, wow, I really love to solve this problem. How can, like, I didn't want to have a whole bunch of extra split squat racks in the gym. And I hate doing split squats on the bench. Just, it's not perfect. It just doesn't work for all the different heights and the weird, and the foot is weird. And so, I was like, everyone has a squat rack. What if we just slip this thing on the end of the bar, and then we had split squat racks for everyone with this like cheap piece of foam? And I was like, this would really solve a problem for me. And that's how I think about this. Be selfish. I'm never trying to be like, if I make this, I'll put my kids through college. It was like, hey, I need this so I can get to the work that I want to get done. And that framework, I think, is everything. I don't set out to make products. I set out to like, I love strength and conditioning. I love training. And then simultaneously, how am I going to solve these sets of problems? And if there is something worth solving, let's go ahead and solve it. And I guarantee you, you can do this. Anyone can do this. My wife calls it business idea 4,271. I'm like, Juliet, we could like, and she's like, you probably have a little touch of the ADHD, Kelly. And, and I'm a little obsessive and compulsive about, like, I perseverate on things, and I'm like deep down this rabbit hole, because that's what keeps me in the game and interested.
What's the, with the split squat rack pad, would that be your favorite product you've created? What's your favorite product?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the one that's been the most knocked off is the Supernova, right? That original Supernova was big enough. It went into a big ass, didn't get swallowed in an airplane seat, and it had a lot of innovative tissue shearing mechanisms in there. And when Nike made a knockoff, and now, of course, you can buy 10,000 versions of it on Amazon, that's made in China. I think that thing, just because it has continued to be so robust and useful. I mean, it's like an heirloom that you hand down, ultimately, I see things when people make things like that little bomb attachment for, landmine stuff, the landmine bomb. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? And then someone made like a triangle Zercher pad. I was like, why didn't I think of that? Like, I sometimes I feel so dumb. I'm like, I should have thought of that. I'm glad I'm in a coaching community where people are trying to solve problems, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the other end of things, I wrote down this question. Did you ever have a product that you either had the idea of or you created where you're like, oh my God, dude, that was just not the answer, or that was not it, or that did not work? Do you have any crazy ones like that?
No, no, only because, by the time we have done something, we've tested it and retested it, and it's been useful. And there's like a, bunch of stuff that just, never sees the light of day because it just wasn't useful, And, I think my wife and business partner, Juliet, if she was here, she would say she goes insane from all the stuff that comes to our house, because I'm like, that looks cool. That looks cool. That looks cool. And, some of this for me to stay interested, as you say, is just the novelty of having a new tool to solve a problem. And some of it sticks and some of it doesn't stick. And I think that's really what's useful about coaching and being in a regular coaching environment, not talking about coaching, is that you can see what works and what doesn't work. And if you think you are the bee's knees, if you think you're the shit, just go ahead and hang out with a college team, and you're going to find out real quick if your stuff works, if it doesn't work, if you look like you have a dick growing out of your head. Your athletes will tell you very quickly about whether it's bullshit or not. And I think that's really important part of this process,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Coach, this was awesome. I know I took up a lot of your time here, but I appreciate you coming on. This is exactly what I was hoping it was. This is sweet.
I appreciate it. And everyone, if your training and play is not looking like Austin, on the turf, the games, the activation, I guarantee you all of his athletes are having the most fun. And athletes that feel better, play better. Athletes that are joyful in process and in play will always show up for more. And the second it stops feeling like play, you've died. You've lost.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys watching. Keep chopping wood.
Thank you for listening. Join us next week as we dive down another rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram at Austin Jochum to stay updated on future podcast guests. Keep chopping wood.